the school for choosing this topic. It's a really loving choice. It's an area that's beginning to take on in law schools, and it's a perfect area of law for law students. These cases are ideal pedagogically, and it's also perfect for vets. Right now, the VA has more than a 2 million case backload of these cases, with more and more coming in the door. So the more that these cases can be streamlined and perfected, the more effective the system can be and the more people we can help get benefits. Before I get going on the presentation, I do also want to acknowledge any of the vets here in the room. So if you could just raise your hand if you've ever served in the military, so that we can just thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. What I intend to do today is share with you just a little bit about my experiences, beginning with my career in the Army, which really informs so much the work that I'm doing today. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about my program, some of the cases we've had, some of the work I've been able to do and I've been blessed to do with students both at Berkeley and postdoc fellows at Chapman. I'm going to talk a little bit about my time at Walter Reed. That's this photo right down in the bottom corner. That was my first assignment in the Army, and I had a choice to go to Fort Bragg or to go to Walter Reed. Walter Reed is a medical hospital, and I really felt a draw to go there. And so I followed that, and I went to Walter Reed and was assigned to represent service members who were either wounded or had developed some injury or disease while in service and were getting out of service. What happens is there's a process. So it's an administrative process where they have a lawyer, and they get to try and argue for higher benefits. Sometimes they just get a severance check. Sometimes they get a disability retirement, which lasts a lifetime. And sometimes they want to stay in. And so I had a lot of interaction with about 500 cases, really, 450, 500 cases during that time with these service members. I then served in a number of different capacities. I deployed to Gitmo. I did some training in Quantico at the Marine Corps. And this is me just tagging along with some infantry on a patrol, which was kind of fun. But when I think about my time in service, what I really think about are the faces, really the faces of the people that I represented. I think about soldiers coming into my office, and I often heard this expression, I don't want to be a broke soldier. Because I had a lot of clients who had come into the military and had serious injuries in jump school. I think of one who'd had a number of injuries at jump school and finally had so severely injured his back that he was sitting in my office with a morphine pump and processing the saying goodbye to the career that he loved and trying to figure out what was going to be next for him, and working with him and having the opportunity to support him in that and to represent him. I also think about those soldiers that so touched me that wanted to stay in no matter what. I had some service members come into my office that you look at their record and their file, and there is no way they should be serving in the military. But they'd say, ma'am, I want to be here. I'll do anything to be here. And it was so touching to me. We'd have commander statements. Some of them would go out, they weren't supposed to do this, but they'd go out and they'd take PT tests, and they'd pass them. Physical fitness tests, they'd pass them. And they'd go before the board, and sometimes the board, even though their condition was such that they really shouldn't serve, the board would still let them stay in and serve. And I just loved seeing that courage and commitment that some of these service members had. One in particular, I had a service member that had diabetes, but he managed to manage it well enough to stay in, and he made it to 18 years. So he was just shy of being retirement eligible for years in service. He went through the board, and his condition wasn't bad enough to justify a disability retirement, so he was going to get a check and walk out the door with no retirement, no benefits. And he came in and said, I don't care what you do, but I am staying in the Army, so let's figure this out. And we did. We brought experts in and talked to his doctors, and we got doctors to write letters, and ultimately he was able to stay in and retire. And that was the first hug I ever got from a client. He was a brand new captain, That's the first hug I ever got from a client, and I think he practically just lifted me right off the floor. So it's just really powerful, that work, and it really informs my work today. The work with Jessica Lynch, those issues were so interesting, and they were so novel, some of them. But what was really meaningful was the young woman behind the uniform, and what she had been through, and what she would be facing in the future. But I also think about the face I really see the most is a name you haven't heard. And this was a young woman whose hospital room was just down the corridor from Private Jessica Lynch. And in 2003, I had deployed to Gitmo, and I had come back to Walter Reed, and we were then just receiving the first victims of the Iraq War, the first wounded. And General Kiley, who was then the commander of Walter Reed Army Medical Center, went on to be the Surgeon General of the Army, had appointed me to be the deputy of what was called the Family Assistance Center. And the idea was to support families in whatever legal issues might come up as they were coming to meet their loved ones at Walter Reed. And boy, did we ever have legal issues coming up. And I remember one night I was sitting in my office, and I heard the phone ring. I was working late, and I heard the phone to the chaplain's office ring right across the hall, and it rang and it went to voicemail. And then I heard the Red Cross phone ring, and it rang and it went to voicemail. And then my phone rang. And I picked it up, and it was the mother of this soldier, and she said, "Can you please come up here on the ward? We need somebody up here." And I said, "Well, can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on?" And she said, "Look, my daughter's having an operation tomorrow, and I need somebody up here." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm a lawyer. Can I try and get you the on-call number for maybe a chaplain or a counselor or something?" And she asked the third time, "Can you please come up here? I need somebody up here right now." And so I got in the elevator and walked across the hospital, got in the elevator and went up and just said, "Oh God, just let me be whatever I need to be for her today. Just let me do whatever it is I need to do." And I walked in that room, and it was this African-American woman. She's probably about 19 years old. And what I learned in talking to her is that she had deployed to Iraq, and after only being there for a few months, somehow, when they were offloading a Humvee, she ended up trapped under it. And she'd lost one leg in theater, and they brought her to Walter Reed, and they had been trying to save the other leg. And they'd just been informed that the next morning they were going to amputate her other leg. And I learned in talking to her and her mom that she was a young single mom herself. And what was so amazing about that experience was here I was as a lawyer. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a chaplain. But what I learned was just the power of holding for somebody. Just holding in a loving way. Listening. Seeing their essence. And just being with them. And what I had the beautiful opportunity was to observe was her courage in telling her mom, "I'm going to be okay, Mom. There was this vet here from Vietnam today, and he's got those kind of devices where he can actually run marathons. I'm going to be just fine. I'm going to be okay." And I thought, wow, what strength of heart she has. And it was really the culmination of those things. At that point, a seed was planted in me that grew, and eventually I came back to this work. I worked for a sitting governor for a while. I was called back on active duty and deployed. I worked for a law firm for a while, but ultimately, in 2006, I ended up at George Mason Law School and directed the first ever military and veterans law clinic and developed the curriculum for that. And then in 2008, I came out here to Chapman University really just on faith because they'd invited me to come, and I looked at the map, and there's 27 military installations and 200,000 military members around California, and I thought, okay, that's where I need to be. But how am I going to do this? Because I was invited on a visit. It wasn't a full-time job. And what they'd said is, we'll give you a year with the possibility of 2 years, but you've got to hit the ground and try and find some funding for this program. And you know how that can be. If any of you fundraise, it's the hardest thing you ever do. asking for money, trying to get people to believe in what you do, and more than that, invest in what you do. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go and figure it out. So I did, and man, it was so great. It's like if you build it and they will come. Because I connected within the first few months there with AMVETS, God bless AMVETS, who agreed to fund our program. They gave us $1.5 million, and we started our clinic that January. So we had 2 years to start it up. I moved here in August, we started it in January. And so it just was meant to be, and I really think that a lot of this work, it wants to happen, and people are inspired by this work, and there's really service members who really truly need this help. And so that's what I've been doing. The program has developed. Now I have a clinical program at Bolt Hall, so I work with law students at Bolt on cases. And the program at Chapman has developed. We're now our own department, which is just so great. So we're a military law institute. The AMVETS Legal Clinic is within the institute. And we operate that component with postdocs. So this is my team. We're a small team, as you can see. But so I have postdoc fellows that work with me. They're recent law school graduates that have anywhere from 1 to 3 years of experience. The great news is they work full time. So unlike law students, they can sit there on the phone with the VA and keep working through that phone tree until they get what they need. They're available to go to court. They're available to travel. So even though it's a smaller crew, it's a mightier crew in that regard anyway. And we've also just been contacted by Equal Justice Works, who's interested in placing some interns in our program. So we'll be developing that opportunity and having more interns work with us. And they'll be paid by Equal Justice Works, which is really great for us, really a win-win all the way around. Our mission is over here on the right. I just want to acknowledge this is a Chapman Law student, Brandon Erickson, former Chapman Law student, who I connected it with within a few months of coming to Chapman. And he's actually an amputee. That's a prosthetic there in the picture, his right arm. He lost his right arm in service, and that's a photo of him at the top before he was injured. And he was very helpful in getting the clinic up and running and helping me to connect to some people in California and having the initiative to do that, and then worked in the clinic for 2 years, actually, until he graduated. Our mission has many prongs. The first and the primary one is that we provide pro bono representation to military families and veterans. So we represent active duty troops in some cases, if of course it's something the JAG Corps can't take. Having been in the JAG Corps, I know how capable and flexible and talented the JAG officers are. And so if we can supplement a JAG officer, we do, but we don't usually take things that local JAGs can do. We do things that they can't do, like civil legal claims. So a soldier has a problem with the landlord or a cell phone company or something like that, we get involved. And military vets, in all kinds of cases, we do veterans claims, we do what are called traumatic service group life insurance claims. We also do impact litigation now, and this we often have to partner with larger firms. We can go to court, we have been to court, we have a case now in federal court. I just flew 2 of my fellows out to the Court of Claims for a hearing on one of those cases. But where it starts to get really involved in litigation, we partner with law firms to help with that, mainly because of expenses, travel and deposition and those kind of things. And then we also have academic pursuits. And this isn't just because we're at a school. What I've really found is that the work we're doing is crucial, I think, in informing academia about some of these issues that we're encountering. So the work we do every day really informs our research and our writing. And then we connect and coordinate with nationwide partners, state partners, to try and pool our efforts, I guess you could say. So these are some of the publications. I have a book. I'm going to leave this with Dean Van Cleve for whoever, if anybody would find it useful, who works in this area, or it could just be an expensive coaster, I don't know, whatever works for you. But it's a textbook, and it's designed to be a textbook for a doctrinal course on military and veterans law or a clinical course on military and veterans law. And then I'm also now working on a book that's going to be similar material, only geared toward practitioners. And these are just some of our articles and such. But on the point of informing academia, we've learned, for example, things like when it comes to suicide, in the context of our cases, we've learned that what the military giveth with one hand, it taketh away with the other. So you hear the military talking a lot about this concern over suicide. But what we've learned is that there's a malingering provision of the UCMJ. So if you shoot yourself in the leg because you don't want to go into combat, you can be punished. Well, we have a client, and we found that there are others out there too, who had deployed and came back with severe depression, severe PTSD, attempted suicide numerous times, and then found himself being disciplined for malingering. And so the message I think the military is sending there is, if you're going to try and commit suicide, you darn well better be successful, right? If you're not, you're going to be punished. And that's what happened to our client. So our client is separated, and now we're trying to get a discharge upgrade for our client. I also read in Time magazine about a year or two ago about a soldier who was trying to get help. He'd been suicidal, and he'd been trying to get help from the military. And he was on hold on a hotline, a suicide hotline, and he had the gun in his lap. And he's on hold, and he's on hold, and he's on hold. And on his cell phone, he tries to call his wife, who's at class. And she says, "Oh, I'll be home soon, I'll be home soon." He's on hold for 45 or 50 minutes. He ends up taking his life while he's on hold with the Army suicide hotline. And so this story was featuring some of the steps the military is taking. And I know it's a big problem, and I know there's no easy answer. But some of these things people don't really know about, and it trickles into our work that we see when a service member is discharged with a lower level discharge for something like malingering. So that's one example of how I think the scholarship we do is really important in being able to inform what's going on. And that's true with our op-eds and some of that stuff we do. We also, on the outreach piece, we also do workshops. We've partnered with on various symposia. We've had events in acknowledgement of 9/11, workshops. We work with interns out at Los Alamitos, who we've done some workshops and training opportunities with. One of the coolest things I think we've done is we've brought in Deepak Chopra. You guys know who Deepak Chopra is? International mind-body expert. So I thought, what he has to say, I think a lot of vets could really benefit from. And this is where intent and really power of intent comes in, because I said, I'm bringing Deepak Chopra. I don't know how it's going to happen, but he's going to come and he's going to do an event called Healing Wounds of War. And I started talking, and it turns out that I knew someone from across campus who had a connection with Deepak. So I emailed Deepak's scheduler, and she got back to me and said, sure, he'll come. And usually he charges about $300,000 to come. He came for free. He came for free. And he brought signed books for all of the veterans there. So what a beautiful event. We had 300 people learning about new ways to heal the mind and the body. And then another really special guest we hosted was Captain Luis Carlos Montlavan. He was also an Army officer, was injured in Iraq, really went into a downward spiral, was agoraphobic, couldn't leave the house, had PTSD, was suicidal, and he ended up getting paired with this beautiful service dog, Tuesday, who he credits really with saving his life. And he's written a book called Until Tuesday. It became a New York Times bestseller. So I reached out to him, and he came out, and what an amazing event. We had people from all over Southern California that came up for it, and several Marines themselves who came with their service dogs. So it's just really, it's cool. It's great to be able to have that kind of synergy around it. Some of the other events up here in the right-hand corner are a couple of my fellows. They're at San Quentin. We're looking at doing a parole project at San Quentin. And so they were up there interviewing some prisoners up there. At the bottom, we're at a stand-down. These 3 fellows are there. Stand-down for homeless vets, where we just do on-the-spot intakes. Symposium over there on the right. And at the top, I'm really proud of this one, because that's in the center there, the taller one. In the center is Lieutenant General Chipman, and he was the TJAG, the Judge Advocate General of the Army, so the highest ranking JAG officer in the Army. And he came for a visit. He was actually doing something in San Diego, and we got a call from his office, and they said, could General Chipman come up and take a look? And I said, could he come up? Anytime, of course. Of course he can. So that was just really, really special to see that kind of interest by the JAG Corps leadership in what we're doing and spend a little bit of time with him. And really special for my fellows, too. We've also worked in military voting issues. The MOVE Act, I won't get too much into the details, but it's supposed to ensure that ballots get to service members 45 days in advance of an election. And we've learned that that doesn't happen, and so you end up with service members really being disenfranchised. And so we've done some work on that project, which actually involved, in some cases, really on-the-ground work, calling counties to try and figure out when the ballots had gone out and when they hadn't, and working to make that happen. And we worked with the MVP, the Military Voter Protection Project. So this was just another opportunity where partnering with someone who's an expert in this area gave the students and fellows an opportunity to just get a little bit of a taste of it and try and move policy in the direction they're proud of. These are our statistics, just generally 200,000 troops in California, the number of calls we've had. We've recovered about $5 million in monetary awards and benefits. So I'm proud of that, and what really that speaks to is just the need out there. What it tells you is that there are a lot of people out there who need lawyers, and not only that they need lawyers, but they have good cases. These are not frivolous cases. A lot of them are really quite good. Types of cases: basic civil cases, landlord-tenant, consumer protection, traumatic service group life insurance appeals. I'll talk a little bit about that in greater detail here in a moment. And I'm going to give you a few examples using cases. This is a vet that we represented. There's a confidential settlement agreement, so I can't talk a lot about it, but I can talk on the edges a little bit. He's a Korean and World War II vet in his 90s, and he came to us, and it was really quite clear that he was the victim of fraud. And so we went to work on that case, and were able to settle the case for him and recovered $30,000. And then he came to our program, actually, and we had an evening where he interacted with the students and fellows, and he shared with us some stories about his time in World War II. And what was most touching is he talked about being on the ship that received all of these victims from the Philippines who had been in these death camps, and what it was like seeing them come aboard, and that some of them were 90 pounds and some of them didn't make it. And as he shared this, here he is in his 90s, this is a lifetime ago, and his big tears were just rolling down his cheeks. And it really hits home about how these experiences our vets have had are so central in their lives. But there's still so many things that need to be healed that really may never be healed. Traumatic service group life insurance. These claims, I think, are ideal for law students. So students out there or anyone looking to get involved in claims that pack a big punch but don't really take too much time and aren't that complicated. Traumatic service group life insurance benefits, these were first started in 2005. Put simply, the idea is to offset the expenses of being traumatically wounded. So it's not a disability benefit, it's a one-time payment, and the payment ranges from $25,000 to $100,000, depending on the injury and how long you needed help with certain activities and such. So there's a whole analysis that goes along with it, but that's the gist of it. This is one of our TSGLI cases. This one's going to federal court because there's a really interesting issue here. This is a major who, former major, who while performing sit-ups for a PT test in the Army, was not on a proper mat, experienced a blunt force trauma, stay with me here, which knocked loose a blood clot and resulted in a spinal cord stroke. So he ended up paralyzed from the waist down. So there's issues about whether or not this is traumatic. We have our experts saying it's the result of blunt force trauma, and that fits the definition of traumatic injury. But what's interesting is that the response from the military, the reason for denial, is not the best argument. In fact, it's a shocking argument, and that's why we're taking it up. The reason for denial is he was doing those sit-ups voluntarily, and you have to experience an involuntary external force. Well, anyone who's been in the military knows that very little is voluntary, but particularly, right? But particularly a mandatory PT test. And under that rationale, if you think about it, we aren't subject to the draft. And a lot of people who deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan chose to do so. They raised their hand. So if I'm a paratrooper and I choose to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan and my chute doesn't open, under that rationale, they could say, you voluntarily jumped out of that parachute. So we are challenging that. And the interesting legal issue is that that standard exists not in the law, but in a handbook that they promulgated, a little pamphlet. So we think that they're engaging in illegal rulemaking. So really the issue, this is the story behind it, is poor Major Foster, who were trying to get TSGLI benefits. But the legal issue is an administrative law one, and whether or not the VA illegally promulgated rules, and we think they did. So we took it up to the Court of Claims. It was the first TSGLI case to ever elevate to that point, and we got bumped. We thought that that would be the appropriate court for jurisdiction. There's a question, it's kind of open in the statute, really, whether it would be. We thought that would be a friendlier court, so that's where we brought it. And ultimately, it has been transferred to a federal court in Alabama, where Major Foster lives. So we've partnered with the law firm there, and who knows what's going to happen, but it's a great opportunity to test the law a little bit here. And boy, if we can get a ruling that the VA engages in illegal rulemaking, that could really change a lot of things, because this isn't unique. This problem, at least, isn't unique. Another vet that we represented in TSGLI, this was a Marine. He lost 2 fingers on one hand, and shrapnel went through the palm of his other hand while serving in Iraq. And they did agree that it was a traumatic injury, but they didn't think it was all that bad. And so we had to prove that he needed help with activities of daily living. And we're able to do that. But it took 3 appeals to do that, and finally he did recover $50,000. This is a kind of a complicated case. I won't spend too much time on it, but this is, we're challenging the termination of Air Force officers. There were 157 officers who were terminated, and they were within what we think of as the 6-year protective window. They had all promoted to major, and they were within 6 years of retiring. And ordinarily, if you've promoted to 04, and you have no misconduct, and you're within 6 years, it's kind of a safe haven. Well, the Secretary of the Air Force unilaterally changed that window from 5 to 6 years. And we think there's an open question about whether or not he had discretion to do that. So we've looked at the granting statute and some of the floor debates at the time, and it was really clear that the intent behind the statute was to provide some employment protection for service members, that it was to be treated as a protective window, so that they could expect if you keep your nose clean and you get to 6 years, you'll be able to stay in. Even if that means you never make lieutenant colonel, you just stay in as a major. Well, this really upset the apple cart there. We had service members getting out, and some of the stories were pretty dramatic. This is one of our clients, Kill Mosley. He actually got his termination notice while he was on his way, literally about to fly for his deployment to Afghanistan. So he was being deployed and being told, you know, if you make it back, not going to have a job. And this call came in this case came in a really interesting way. So I was on the Dennis Miller show talking about some legal issue, and he was listening to the show in Afghanistan online. And we were talking about some of the cases we're working on. So he gets online and he emails the producer, and so after the segment, they contact me and I contact him, and pretty soon we learn that this isn't just him. There was something to his story, and there's 157 of them. And so that's a case we're working on now. Because of the Ferries Bar, we can't get right into federal court, although we do have a constitutional issue. So I think ultimately we may be able to, but for now, it's before the Board of Correction to Military Records. And we, you know, honestly, we wholly expected denial. But we intend to challenge it up and see where we get with that one. We also do disability compensation cases. So if a service member or a veteran has a disability that occurred in service, And you can link the two. It's putting it simply, he or she may be entitled to veterans benefits. So we handle a number of those. This is our highest award that we've gotten in any single case. This client had been homeless when he came to us, and he was living in his car with his little service dog, Buster. But incredibly, he was a Vietnam-era vet who suffered from PTSD, and incredibly, he had managed to keep the claim alive. These things really have no real statute of limitations. As long as you just keep sending things in, your claim is alive, even if what you send in doesn't support your claim. So he had managed to do that. So we took the case and were able to, the students found witnesses actually, using Google to the incident that he had told us about. We're able to run people down who in fact remembered it incredibly. And we were able to pull medical records and some other things and weave it all together. And he achieved a 100% permanent disability rating from the VA, which means that he moved out of his car. And now he gets housing, he gets full medical care, he gets stipend every month. But the most valuable piece to him was that he got retroactive benefits going back to the date that he filed. So it was a huge chunk of change. And we had an accountant work it all up for us to get a bottom line when you take into account the retroactive benefits, the prospective benefits, the medical care, and they estimated somewhere around $2 million. So he's really, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, not that we need a rainmaker, but if we did, he is one. He sends people to us all the time. He's really become a good friend of our clinic. We recently received a grant for a gift. It's no strings really, for $1.1 million to work on the issue of sexual assault and harassment. And I just want to say, because I still can't believe it. The donor, whom I've met, chooses to remain anonymous. But isn't that amazing that he has given us this money, $1.1 million, to work on this issue? So we're trying to work on this issue. We have had one case. It actually was one that predated the Iraq and Afghanistan war. It was an ongoing veterans claim. A woman had been gang raped in service, had PTSD as a result of it, and we were able to get her a 70% permanent disability retirement. So that was good. We're now in the process of trying to help any victims of the Iraq or Afghanistan war. So we're making connections to try and do that, mainly in things like discharge upgrade. Actually, we do have one. It's a discharge upgrade. The vet was sort of punished when she came forward and ended up with a bad discharge, and the perpetrator didn't. And anyway, so we're challenging that to try and get her discharge upgraded, and doing research and policy work. These are two of my fellows that were just in DC at a conference on the issue. So we look forward to doing more along those lines too. It really is a team effort. If that's not already clear through the slides, we work with so many wonderful people who volunteer time. We have a pro bono network. Adam Siegler has worked with us. He actually pulled together the Valor Guides, which are incredible work that lists all the different resources in all the counties in California. And so that has been a great, great help and service to us. And we played some role in the Orange County one, but really it's Adam's work on that. We've partnered on some cases with the JAG Corps, Wounded Warrior Program, etc. I have an adjunct that works with us who's in the Guard at Los Alamitos, and that's been great because my fellows are not former military, so this is all very new for them. But they got to go out. We went to the weapons range, not with real ammunition, but the ones with the screens, so to say. And so this is us in front of a helicopter and that. So it's a fun experience for them to partner in that way as well. The thing that's really, I'm reading right now, it's coming forward for me, is on the plane here, I picked up this little book that I'm reading, and it's called The Power of Kindness. And one section was talking about how kindness really doesn't only affect the receiver of kindness, but it so affects the giver of kindness. And that really, as I was reading that, I thought I just have to share that because that's so much what I've experienced and what our students and fellows have experienced. It's just the beauty that it brings to your life to be able to use your talents and your skills to help someone else. And you're not just helping someone else, you really are helping you. It enhances your life to be able to work in this way. And we always send out surveys to see how we're doing, and I love getting the quotes back, so these are 2 of them. And it just helps us feel good about what we're doing, and also correct if there's something we didn't do well or we didn't handle the way we should. It's a good opportunity to get that kind of feedback too. This is our contact information. If anyone wants to find us, we're on the web. Our application is on the web, and we're always taking cases. And this is our program. Go to questions in just 1 minute, but I wanted to share this other piece because it's really interesting. So when we moved from the law school and became our own little department, they gave us this little house, and it's from dates to like 1908. And I thought, well, I wonder if any vets have ever lived here. That would be neat if we're living in a house where vets live. And so I talked to the archivist and said, is there any way, is that easy to find out? Can we figure out who's lived here before? So she did a search. 7 veterans have called our house home, going back to World War I. So World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. So we had a plaque made that's right by the door with all of their names and their service and the war they served in. Because as we're going in and out, it's just a good reminder. And for me, it was kind of like confirmation that we're in the right place, doing the right thing. So anyway, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Well, military law is so different from veteran law, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe under state law, criminal justice system, how do you keep them all straight?
Well, thank you. So the question is, how do we keep it straight since we're working in military and veterans law? When I say military law, it's really more the military administrative procedures that we sometimes get involved with, like what's called a physical evaluation board, the type of work I did when I was on active duty. We've had times where we partner with a JAG office and do those kind of cases. We don't do criminal work though. The JAGs are the experts at that stuff. We don't defend in courts martial. We don't really touch on criminal law. We do more administrative kind of claims, and then civil law. So a suit against another party, a suit against a landlord, a cell phone company, a car dealership, that kind of thing. We did just have a case that was a foreclosure matter where the bank had illegally foreclosed against our client, and it had been going on for some time. And ultimately we settled that, and she got the house outright, which was worth like $350,000. So when I talk, so the cases are really civil law against a private party or benefits related. Yeah.
So you do a lot of landlord-tenant fraud cases. Are you the only attorney in that supervising these different areas of law, or do you?
No. I have an adjunct that works with me, and he does a lot. He has a litigation background in California, so he supervises those cases, most of those cases. But the fellows who work with me are all admitted to the bar. That's one requirement for the postdoc fellowship, is that they have to have passed the bar and be admitted. So while they are new lawyers, they are very much up and running. So it's not supervising in the sense that you would a clinical program. The students at Bolt, we do supervise those more closely. And I have a colleague, I go up periodically, but it's a long way. As you know, I'm in Orange County. So there's someone there that helps with cases on that front. And then we sometimes will partner with local lawyers. We had a family lawyer that helped us with one case. We don't take a lot of family matters, but occasionally we do, and when we do, we try and bring in a family lawyer if we can. other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like hogging the questions.
Okay. There's no cue.
Yeah, but it's because I believe I'm from Hawaii, and you know, which is and I'm just thinking, how can we spread this type of service to other organizations? Like I'm interning at the Legal Aid Society, and they have different like regional centers all over the nation, and I don't want to replicate it because you know this is your project.
Oh, replicate
Like,
it.
how
Do
you
it. Do it. Yes.
Okay.
Do it. Call me. I'll help you.
Yeah, it's such a great service that you're providing, and you know, and right now I'm looking around the room, and we have such a small group, but you know, like your goal is to inform other people about the issues and how relevant they are, and you know, with the budget crisis, it's even more important to provide these services pro bono or volunteer. So I'm just
That's great. And if I can help in any way, that goes for anybody. Call me. I share our information freely. I want for as many people to be doing this work as possible. You know, I have no investment in it being attached to our clinic. My investment is really just that it happens, you know, however that happens.
That's great.
Yes, ma'am.
Professor, do your students get credit for this as if it were a course? How do you work the law student participation?
The law students at Bolt get credit. The fellows who work with me get paid. But that's loosely. They get paid what a fellow would make, which is a little more than what a secretary makes, really. But they do get paid, and it's a benefited position. And then the new fellows we're going to bring, or the new interns we're going to be bringing on under Equal Justice Works, will be getting both, but it'll depend on their particular law school, so how much credit in that. But they'll get credit from their law school, and then they'll be getting a stipend through Equal Justice Works, but working for us. So we'll have to draft that MOU and figure out how that's going to work. But yeah, so that's how that's going to work. Yeah.
So in transitioning this type of program from first at George Mason and now at Chapman, what improvements did you make, or what things, and perhaps being in California, what did you have to change to make the program as successful as it is now?
Okay, what did I change to make it as successful? Well, a number of things really. I think adding postdocs is really where our program really took off. And that isn't to take anything away from the fantastic law students who do this work. It's just that having it supplemented by full-time lawyers who are also learning. I run it kind of like a residency program, so they're learning, we're analyzing everything they do, we're mocking things, we have workshops, so it's kind of like being in school, but they're a little more further along, they're a little more sophisticated in their understanding, and they're full-time, so that has helped a lot. The other thing really was pulling the materials together, getting the book together, because that has been, there's really nothing out there. And so every semester I was having to put binders together and photocopy stuff, and just taking the time to sit down and create it into its own work with problems to work through, citations right in there, helped me anyway, and it helps get the fellows and interns up and running to say, read chapter 1 through 3. And then I know we're all on the same page. So, yes?
Do you, and if you do, how do you get support from California Department of Veterans Affairs or the County Veteran Service Officers to do your work?
Well, you know, we haven't reached out. Honestly, we could maybe do more there. But we have such a close connection with AMVETS, our funder, that's really where we've gone for supplemental support. And they have service officers all over. And so sometimes we'll partner, because we'll sometimes see a case that's not ready for a lawyer, may never need a lawyer, may just need a really good service officer to file it. So we've worked with AMVETS mainly. Yes?
Maybe it would be helpful if you talk about how you could, as an attorney, get accredited by the VA or be a private attorney or through a veterans service organization.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. He suggested that I talk a little bit about getting accredited to handle cases before the VA. It's really quite simple. For service officers, they have to go through they're non-lawyers, and have to go through particular training and such. For lawyers, you have to be admitted to the bar in good standing, and then agree to do a CLE every year. And you get a year to do the first, I think it's a year, to actually do the first CLE. So once your paperwork gets in, they'll certify you on the good faith promise that you will do the first one within a year. And then every year you just do a qualifying CLE of 3 hours and send it in, and then you're qualified to represent clients before the VA. Yeah.
All the way up to the court of military issue.
As you move up, so the Board of Veterans Appeals and the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims require separate admission, which also isn't that complicated. It takes a little bit of lead time, but isn't that complicated. So as your case, that does have a fee. So as your case develops, then you get admitted as you need to. Most of ours, though, are handled at the regional level, at the lower levels. So we really, and that I think that really serves the vets, actually, because if we can keep it there and keep supplementing information and trying to perfect the claim, they get adjudicated more quickly, because there's usually at least a year just to take the case from this office to this office. It's a year almost every time you move up. And that's not with anything actively happening, that's just with shipping it over there. So you really want to be sure that you want to keep moving it up. If there's still something more you can say or perfect it, you keep it where it is and try and perfect it. So that's what we do with most of ours anyway. Yeah.
You mentioned that there was like millions of backlog in the Bs for
Claims, yeah.
service-connected claims.
Yeah.
And you said that the solution would be for them to streamline the process to get these claims for. Has your group done anything, like maybe provide a standard or to help this process?
Not really. Other than what we try to do. When I say streamline the process, what I mean is send in good cases that are really put together well, so that it's not something, because the VA, it's almost like, well, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, so I don't want to perpetuate a rumor, so I say this with a caveat, but I have heard that at the VA, they get paid by their work credits, and a work credit is every time you do something on a case. So if you sit down and you decide a case, that's 1 work credit, which could take a whole afternoon or a couple afternoons. But if you look at it and send back a letter to the vet to say, send us another copy of, you get a work credit. And so it incentivizes whirling about. And that's what happens. So that's one thing that I think, if that is in fact the way it's done, we certainly see it's believable that that's the way it's done. I don't know that for sure. But I do know that there's a lot of volleying about of things that don't matter. And that seems like they could do better with that. And then we could do better. Veterans and groups putting claims together do better in making sure that when you send something in, it's really good and solid and you've got the information you need. Because it's this back and forth, the fact that you can always supplement your case really means that sometimes advocates don't really send in anything that's all that great. They'll say, oh, this napkin has a good note on it, an interesting note on it, let's send that in and, call it evidence. And they do. Sometimes the things we've seen are just bizarre, what is in a claims file. So that's where just being a little more diligent and taking the time to put a good case together. Yeah.
For claims, the VA is trying to move into the electronic world. On the health side, they've already done that, but on the claims side, they're still getting there. But they are going to what is called a fully developed claim and put in an express line. So if you get all the information before you send it in, you have a better chance of success instead of volleying back and forth.
Yeah, and that is a new thing. We haven't done that yet, and I haven't explored in terms of any appellate rights they may be giving up. That is, I want to take a closer look at that. I don't know if you've had experience with that or not. I like the idea just so long as there's not anything getting lost in that, any bites at the apple. And I don't know, because I just haven't had one of those, but thank you for offering that, yeah. Any other questions? You can answer? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention, I work at the VA. I've worked in our homeless programs and our justice programs, and I wanted to mention that if a veteran is homeless, and that is marked on their service-connected application, it can be expedited significantly.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
You know,
I know of, I don't think Henry Newton's here today. Henry's our homeless veterans VBA outreach person, and he's had cases that will resolve within like 48 hours of application because of homeless.
that's excellent. You know, I may want to talk to you offline because we have a case we're trying to expedite because our veteran is dying. And it's an Agent Orange claim, and he hasn't been granted benefits, but he is on dialysis and he's waiting for a kidney. And we've had it for some time. We filed it months ago, and then we filed the form to expedite it. And like 3 months later, we got back a letter saying, thank you, we got your form to expedite it, and we'll be considering expediting it. And we can't seem to get it expedited. And that, he's in a pretty serious situation. And so there's a process to do it there, but our experience, at least with this case, is that it hasn't happened. So I'm glad to hear it's happening on the homeless side. But that's one thing we're right now really pushing the VA on to try and get this vet and his family benefits, before it doesn't matter much anymore, Yeah.
Can I put in a pitch for the county veteran service officers that this gentleman mentioned? They're county employees, there's one in every county, at least one, and their sole mission in life, and they're in 26 states, by the way, and their sole mission in life is to file claims for veterans. They're experts at it. CFR 38 is 1,600 pages, that's the federal code of regulation. 1,600 pages of small print, and then there's an equal volume that explains what's in 30. So you got to really know the law if you're going to file claims. But county veteran service officers can get DD 214s, they can get records, they can be a tremendous resource to everybody here. You have one in every county: San Francisco, Alameda. And so please reach out to them because they can help you on what you're trying to do. And then I need to make another comment. And I'm shy and back. Most of you heard me this morning on why there was justification for Veterans Treatment Corps. What I didn't say is, what's the value to society? The value to our society is we restore people who serve to us back to their normal lives. We restore them to their family. We reduce our social welfare costs, our prison costs. We do all that. And they have a tremendous record of success and not getting re-involved or re-offended. After Vietnam, when Vietnam veterans came home, they basically threw the book at them if they got in trouble. I'm talking about one gentleman who first brought me 1170.9, had been in prisons in 12 states over 20 years before he got the help he needed. So there is a value to society to not locking them up and getting them the treatment they need. Thank you all for everything you're doing.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I imagine you get referrals from many different sources. If you're not able to take a case fully, and provide direct representation for it, do you have different levels of triage, legal triage you provide? Can you talk about what it is you might do for someone you can't take on fully?
Yeah, the first thing that we triage is if it's criminal or complicated family, we don't get involved. Or if it's something where, that would require us to be in court in a remote place in California for multiple hearings, then we don't get involved. So that's our first level. Oh, well, and they also have to have a California connection. That's for our grant, with the exception of the sexual harassment and sexual assault issues. Those could be from anywhere in the country. So that's the first thing. And if we can't, and then it's just a matter of the quality of the case and what we have open. I have two things that I'm trying to achieve. The one is represent service members. The other is offer a really good learning experience for my new lawyers and for the interns. So I balance that, and I look at a case in terms of those two things. If it's a case we can't take, we do our best to try and refer it. We have a network. It's only 42 lawyers, but it's 42 lawyers. So we reach out to the network to see if they can take any of the cases we can't. And then we also, thanks to this book that Adam put together, some of the other programs, we sometimes will send something up like to Swords to Plowshares or to another clinic if we can. Sometimes the Berkeley students are ready for a case and we're not. So we try and refer what we can, and sometimes we can't get it referred, you know, so we do the best that we can to try and make that happen. But we get thousands. We really get thousands of cases every year. And I've got 4 fellows. So if you can imagine, you know.
Can I just add a postscript to that? My experience with Professor Rotunda's clinic has been wonderful. They're tremendously responsive, even under difficult or expedited circumstances. We rely on you very heavily in Orange County, and I'm in Los Angeles County. So it really, most of these cases are local. You have a local veteran and a local court and local agencies issues. So what we really need is that connectivity between the different providers in different counties. And frankly, we lean on you and rely on you very heavily. We think you do wonderful work.
Thank you so much. I'll pass that along to my team too. They're really the ones rowing the oars. Anything else? No? Thank you so much. Oh yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Just didn't get your contact information.
Okay, let me see if I can figure this out.
Searching for a pen. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Make that easy. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I see that. Thank you so much, Professor Rotunda, and congratulations on the great work that you're doing. We will be talking, following up with you. So our next panel will begin at 1:45, back in the same room where we were this morning, 2201. And I look forward to seeing you all there. There's plenty more food. Please enjoy some more food, and thank you again very much. And then we'll let you. Yeah, we'll let the poor Kelly.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you so much.
There we go.
You know what? I've got this crazy string that's been driving me insane all afternoon. So how about right here? Do me a favor.
That may be easier for you.
One picture without picture. How about that? Thank you.
Can I get one with these lovely ladies?
bet.
Because it'll play well in the end, and it'll smooth right through.
You bet. There we go. Got it.
I gotta go. I'm gonna make up for all my trouble.
Thanks so much for coming. It's very nice.
All right. Thanks a lot. So where you said that you subscribe base? In that little house that you showed me?
Yeah,
What's that?
on the Chapman campus. Yeah,
Oh, no, really. But then
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Here, but I just became interested, I rep my started. Some parts of this, and I love having it 4 hours. He's like one of my favorites. He had a 20-year-old that I helped him. And he has a lot of other issues now. Perhaps I
Hi, you were over there, and I'm sorry, I realized I didn't mean to be leaving you out. We need work. I'm in trouble. Oh, yes, I question,
I don't think I'm
This time last year. Someone who's got the right skill set to do it, that could supervise and teach students doing it, and then they actually get money tuition, you know, so it's the class, which is one professor, and under the ABA, there's one professor who's supervising up to 10 for full time, so, you know, one I was, yeah. Kristen is the president of Yellowtown.
Okay.
So we've worked our way around.
Oh, nice.
And we were looking for highway and he's working on the pro bono contract and trying to have it figured out as a more formalized system.
I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me get mine. And if I can, okay.